So every class, what we do, that is, we start with the biography. So this is W.B. Yeats, and his full name is William Butler Yeats. Uh, he was born in Sandymount, Ireland, and died in 28 January 1939. And you know that 1939 is the year of the beginning of the Second World War. And um, Yeats is an Irish poet, dramatist, prose writer, one of the greatest English language poets of the 20th century. And he received a Nobel Prize in 1923. Yeats' father, W.B. Yeats, John Butler Yeats, was a barrister, and next time he became a painter, a very peculiar uh, uh, character character like that. He was a barrister, but next time he became the painter. He had a fascination for painting. His mother, Susan Polexpen, was a daughter of a prosperous merchant in Sligo, Sligo in Western Ireland. That is the birthplace of uh, uh, that means William Butler Yeats' mother. Through both parents, Yeats, pronounced Yeats, claimed kinship with various Anglo-Irish Protestant families who were mentioned in his work. As you know, that in the UK there are religious division, that is Roman Catholicism and Protestantism, and especially the Protestant people had been living in Ireland, and W.B. Yeats has a recognition with the Protestant families, and he was also a supporter of Protestantism, not a direct supporter of Protestantism. Actually, he, in his faith, he felt repelled by their concern of material success. Yet, best hope he felt was to cultivate a tradition more profound than either the Catholic or the Protestant, the tradition of a hidden Ireland that existed largely in the anthropological evidence of its surviving customs, beliefs, holy places, more pagan than Christian. So, W.B. Yeats' religious belief is intended not directly towards Catholicism or Protestantism. Rather, William Butler Yeats' tendency was to the customs, beliefs, folklores, and the holy places, spiritual beliefs, and others that we find in um, Irish culture. That was his fascination, William Butler's fascination. In 1867, when Yeats was only two, his family moved to London, but he spent much of his boyhood and school holidays in Sligo with his grandparents. This country, its scenery, folklore, and supernatural legend would color Yeats' work and form the setting of many of his poems. In 1880, his family moved back to Dublin, where he attended the high school. In 1883, he attended the Metropolitan School of Art in Dublin, where the most important part of his education was in meeting other poets and artists. So, uh, uh, at the time of staying with his grandfather, one important thing happened, that is, his mother would tell the folk tales and other story to W.B. Yeats. And though W.B. Yeats' fascination to folklore and the story and the other sagas, other form of Irish culture, so W.B. Yeats' education started by the inspiration of his educated mother that happened in Sligo. Sligo is the town of the Republican Ireland, as you see. That in the north of Ireland, Strandell of Gravek River, where it meets Sligo Bay. It's known for its literary heritage and a rugged countryside. So Sligo, you see the map here, okay? The Sligo, the Bay Area, okay? So the history, the culture, everything, and also the tradition, cultural heritage, everything is very important in case of W.B. Yeats' birthplace, that is Sligo. There he was born and brought up. Sligo County Museum displays memorabilia of the local poets W.B. Yeats, painting and stone age artifacts. The model is a contemporary art center featuring works by 20th century Irish artists. And this is the area that is 10.3 square kilometer. This is the area. Population in 2060s, nearly 20,000 population had been living there in Sligo. Meanwhile, Yeats was beginning to write, and his first publication, two brief lyrics, appeared in the Dublin University Review in 1885. When the family moved back to London in 1887, Yeats took up the life of a professional writer. He joined the Theosophical Society, whose mysticism appealed to him because it was a form of imaginative life far removed from the workaday world. The age of science was repellent to Yeats. He was a visionary. So the mysticism, the spiritualism, the cultural thing was very much attracted by William Butler Yeats. So we can call him a visionary like Shelley. And also the first two lyrics were inspired by Shelley, as it is mentioned by other sources. And he insisted upon surrounding himself with poetic images. He began a study of the prophetic books of William Blake, and this enterprise brought him into the contact with the visionary tradition such as Platonic, the Neoplatonic, the Swedenborgian, and the alchemical. So Yeats was already a proud young man, and his pride required him to rely on his own taste and his sense of artistic style. He was not boastful, but his spiritual arrogance came easily to him. His early poems, collected in Wanderings of Ocean and the other poems that were appeared in 1889, are the work of an aesthete, often beautiful but always rare-filled. A soul's cry for release for circumstances. Yeats quickly became involved in the literary life of London. He became friends with William Morris, W. E. Hinley, and he was a co-founder of the Rhymers Club, whose members included his friend Lewin Johnson, Arthur Symons, and in 1881, Yeats made Mothgone. Most probably you have heard the name, and also most probably you have read the poem. Is it? Have you read the poem, Mothgone? No, and in 1889, Yeats made Morton an Irish beauty, ardent and brilliant. From that moment, as he wrote, the troubling of my life began. He fell in love with her, but his love was hopeless. Morgan liked and admired him, but he was not in love with him. Her passion was lavished upon Ireland. She was an Irish patriot, a rebel and a rhetorician, a commanding in voice and in person. When Yeats joined in the Irish nationalist cause, she did so partly from conviction, but mostly for love of Maud. When Yeats' play Kathleen Nee Houlihan was first performed in Dublin in 1921, she played in the title role. It was during this period that Yeats came under the influence of John O'Leary, the charismatic leader of the Fenians, a secret society of Irish nationalists. So he got acquaintance with Morgan. So you see the picture of Morgan with whom W.B. Yeats had in love, but that love was not reciprocated by Morgan. After the rapid decline and death of controversial Irish leader Charles Stuart Parnell in 1891, Yeats felt that Irish political life lost its significance, and the vacuum left by politics might be filled. He uh, filled by literature, art, poetry, drama, and legend. So, at the initial stage of his life, William Butler was very much interested with the political life of Ireland, but next time, at the death of Charles Stuart Parnell, William Butler Yeats' interest turned towards literature, art, poetry, drama, religion, culture, history, sagas, story, essays, and like this. And in this regard, the Celtic Twilight, that was published in 1893, a volume of essays was Yeats' first effort towards the end, but progress was slow until 1898 when met Augusta Lady Gregory, an aristocrat who was to become a playwright and his close friend. She was already collecting old stories. The lore of the west of Ireland. Lore is a short form of folklore. Yeats found that this lore claimed with his feeling for ancient ritual, for pagans' belief, never entirely destroyed by Christianity. He felt that if he could treat it in a strict and high style, he would create a genuine poetry, while in personal terms moving towards his own identity from 1998. Yet he spent his summer at Lady Gregory's home, Cool Park, Country, Galway, and he eventually purchased a ruined Norman castle called Thor Bellinley in the neighborhood. Under the name of the tower, this structure would become a dominant symbol in many of his latest and the best poems, that is Tower. Okay, so the uh, Celtic Twilights, that is the collection of prose that ventilates many of Irish culture and tradition. So you see some collection. Yeats, while in his late 20s, published collection of Irish peasant folklore in the two volumes of Celtic Twilight. Most probably, we have discussed Celt at the initial stages of classes of this course. That is, the Celt population is the Aboriginal people living in the whole UK. Especially Celt people had been living the Ireland, the northern parts of the UK, and for this Celtic tradition, that collection of essay has been written by W.B. Yeats, and the many pieces which previously appeared in journals, in fairy and folk tales of the Irish peasantry, that is 18 1888, and in the miscellaneous 1902, that is the Celtic Twilights, written by W.B. Yeats. And in 1899, Yeats asked Morgan to marry him, but she declined. 4 years later, she married Major John McBride, an Irish soldier who shared her feelings for Ireland and her hatred of English oppression. He was actually, that Ireland is a part of UK, but before the Ireland's freedom, it is assumed, or if the history claimed that Ireland and the people of Ireland was oppressed by the English people, that means the people of England, for the cause of religious belief and other, especially the people living in England, they were prone to Roman Catholicism, and the people living in Ireland, they are prone to Protestantism or the pagan beliefs or like that. And for this reason, the people of Ireland had been oppressed by the English people, and that very attitude was not supported by Morgan, and same attitude was shared by the soldier whom Morgan married, and his name was Major John Beckwith. And he was one of the rebels later executed by the British government for their later part of Easter Rising in 1916. Meanwhile, Yeats devoted himself to literature and drama, believing that poems and plays would engender a national unity capable of transfiguring the Irish nation. So, in this way, Major John McBride, Morgan, they had been directly involved in the revolution for the freedom of the Ireland. However, W.B. Yeats had also been fighting, and he thought that the cultural presentation and the heritage presented in the poems might unite the Irish nationality, and that is also a cultural fight against England or the English people. That means Irish people had their own tradition, had their own culture, and had their own identity through their Celtic culture or pagan culture. So W. Yeats did so by presenting the culture, heritage, folklore, and the other things by his poems, essays, and dramas. William Butler had also been fighting for the nationality and the identity of Irish people. He, along with Lady Gregory and others, was one of the originator of the Irish Literary Theatre, which gave its first performance in Dublin in 1899 with its play, The Countess Kathleen. To the end of his life, he remained a director of this theatre, which became the Abbey Theatre in 1904. You must uh, uh, remember the name of this theatre. Abbey Theatre is also famous theatre involved in John Millington scenes and other notable Irish poet and dramatist. In the crucial period, 1999 to 1907, he managed the theatre's affairs, encouraged its playwrights, notably John Millington scenes, and contributed many of his own plays. Among the later that became part of the Abbey Theatre's repertoire are The Land of Land of Heart's Desire, Kathleen Nee, Holihan, The Hourglass, The King's Threshold, On Bailey's Strand, and The Deirdre. So these are the drama written by William Butler Yeats. Yeats published several volumes of poetry during this period, notably the poems 1895 and The Wind Among the Reeds 1899. which are typical of his early verse in their dreamlike atmosphere and their use of Irish folklore and legend. But in the collection of the Seven Woods and the Green Hamlets, yet slowly discarded the pre-Raphaelites colors and rhymes in his early verse and parsed it to of certain Celtic and esoteric influences. The years from 1909 to 1914 mark a decisive change in his poetry. The otherworldly aesthetic atmosphere of the early lyrics had cleared, and the poems of responsibilities, poems, and a play 1914 show a tightening and hardening of his first line, a more sphere and resonating imagery, and a new directness with which Yeats confronts reality and his imperfections. In 1917, Yeats published The Wild Swan at Cool. From then onwards, he reached the maintained the height of his achievements, a renewal of inspiration and the perfecting of techniques and the art, almost without parallel in the history of English poetry. The Tower, 1928, named after the castle he owned and had restored, is the work of a fully accomplished artist. In it, the experience of a lifetime is brought to perfection of form. Still, some of the year's greatest verse was written subsequently, appearing the winding star, the poems in the both of the works of their dominant subject and symbols, the star rising, the Irish Civil War, its own tower, the Byzantine Empire, and its mosaics, Plato, Plotinus, and Porphyry, and the author's interest in contemporary physical research, Yeats explained his own philosophy in the prose work A Vision, a revised vision, and this meditation upon the relation between imagination, history, and the occult remains indispensable to serious students of Yeats despite its obscurities. In 1913, Yeats spent some months at Stone's Cottage, Sussex, with the American poet Ezra Pound acting as his secretary. Pound was the editing translation of No Place of Japan, so he had also worked this. And Yeats, greatly excited by them, the No Drama provided a framework for drama designed for a small audience of initiates, stylistics. Intimate drama capable of fully using covers offered by mask, mime, dance, and song campaign. So WBS had also had a communication with American great poet Ezra Pound. In 1917, Yeats asked Isul Gone, Modgon's daughter, to marry him. She refused, and some weeks later, he proposed to Miss George Hyde Leys and was accepted. They were married in 1917. A daughter, Annie Butler Yeats, and was born in 1919, and a son, William Michael Yeats, in 1921. In 1922, on the foundation of the Irish Free State, Yeats accepted an invitation to become a member of the new Irish Senate. He served for 6 years, and in 1923 he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. Now a celebrated figure, he was indisputably one of the most significant modern poets. In 1936, Oxford Book of Modern Verse, 1992 to 1935, a gathering of the poems he loved was published. Still working on his last plays, he completed The Hern's Egg, his most raucous work in 1938, its last two verse collection, New Poems and the Last Poems and the Two Plays appeared in 1938 and 1939 respectively. In these books, many of his previous themes are gathered up and rehandled, and with an immense technical range. And the aged poet was using ballad rhymes and dialogue structure with undiminished uh, energy as he approached in his 75th year. Yeats died in January 1939 while abroad. Final arrangement for his burial in Ireland couldn't be made, and so he was buried at Ronborn, France. The intention of having his body buried in Sligo was thwarted when World War II began in the autumn of 1939, and in 1948 his body was finally taken back to Sligo and buried in a little Protestant churchyard in Drumcliff, as he specified in Under the Bubbling, and his last poems under his own epitaph cast a cold eye on life, on death, horsemen pass by. Had he yet created to write at age 40, he would probably now be valued as a minor poet writing in dying pre-Raphaelite tradition that had drawn many beauty. Yeats' mythology, from which arises the distilled symbolism of his great poet, is not always easy to understand, nor did Yeats intend its full meaning to be immediately apparent to this unfamiliar uh, with his thought, nor did Yeats intend its full meaning immediately appear to this unfamiliar to his thought and the tradition in which he worked. His own cyclic view of history suggested to him a recurrence and convergence of images so that they became multiplied and enriched, and this progressive enrichment may be traced throughout his work. Among Yeats' dominant images are Leda and the Swan, Helen and the burning of Troy, the tower in its many forms, the sun and the moon. These are his art. In Yeats' verse, they are often shaped into a strong and proud rhetoric, into the many poetic tones of his he was the master. All are informed by the two qualities which Yeats valued and which he retained into the old age, passion and joy, and that is uh, the biography of W.B. Yeats. So we can there are some other pages you will I will be sending you. You will read in later time so that you can get more concrete idea about W.B. Yeats. But we can conclude in such a way that W.B. Yeats was an Irish poet. He is a national poet, and actually, at the very beginning of his life, he passed his childhood and boyhood in Sligo, that is the northern part of the Ireland, and the Bay city, close to the Bay. And in that time, his education is started with the storytelling told by his mother, and at the time, he was influenced by not by Protestantism, either not by Catholicism. He was interested with uh, the Irish culture, heritage, tradition, sagas, story, everything. And next time their family moved to London, and he started in there in London also. And after a few years, he got acquaintance with Morton, another um, another uh, women who had been supported for the Irish tradition and culture. But next time, of course, Morton didn't accept his marriage proposal, and but he next time he married William Butler married another woman, and through the whole process, William Butler Yeats wrote a collection of prose He wrote several dramas and also he wrote the collection of poems. All his writing exhibited the Irish culture, folklore, Irish tradition, Celtic tradition that are the national identity of Irish people. So that is the biography of W.B. Yeats. So you might read this next time. So to get idea of W.B. Yeats biography in details.